Welcome back to Legal Luminaries, the Paralegal Edition, the podcast where we shine a light on the future of the legal profession through the lens of education, innovation, and community. I'm Christine Custodio Suero.
And I'm Kelly Radnathy. And today we're diving into a conversation that resonates deeply with both of us: technology as an equalizer in legal education and legal practice.
Joining us is someone who brings a unique trifecta of experiences in technology, legal, and education. Harvey Zeytuntsyan. Harvey, thank you for being here with us.
Yes, Harvey.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being with us today. We're so excited to have you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. So anyways, you have a really fascinating background. Technology meets legal, meets education. So can you tell us about your path and what drew you into the legal education space?
Sure. I wish I could say that there was this master plan and here are the three things that you must do. But really, I think like most folks, it's a combination of what I was passionate about and what I felt like I was good at, and just keeping my eye open for opportunities. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about each of those different domains. Tech has really been, for me, a lifelong passion, right? And whether it's tinkering with efficiency and travel, or how to knock out the day or knock out the week, I've always loved elegant solutions to just sometimes even mundane issues. And so tech and legal has just been a manifestation of that, right? I'm in practice, I'm knocking out a ton of cases. How can I do it better, faster, more efficiently? Education has also been something lifelong, but it actually took me a while to realize that. As I was practicing, super busy practicing, knocking out cases and working with paralegals, I had the opportunity to be in pretty much every type of law firm setting, the big, the small, the giant. And I realized later that what I was doing when I was reviewing cases or talking to paralegals is I was educating them, right? Educating them and embedding legal knowledge into the process, into the work that we were doing. And I would do the same with our clients, right? HR professionals and managers. Like, how can I help them think the way I would, even if I'm not on the call real time? And so I actually realized that, I guess the inflection point for that was actually this strange period of the pandemic, where that's around the time where I was working remotely and we were moving, all kinds of stuff was going on. And I got this opportunity from higher ed to teach to adult learners in the continuing education setting. And I said, well, the opportunity costs are lower than they'll ever be. And if it's not now, it might never happen. And so I jumped in and I took advantage of the opportunity, and that's just blossomed. I teach now dozens and dozens of paralegals and really enjoy all of it.
Thanks, Harvey. And I even had an opportunity to check out some of your courses that you have on Coursera and Udemy, which we will include in our show notes for today's podcast. And I just thought, wow, outstanding content and your ease of presentation. I just think you're a perfect guest for our podcast, especially speaking to our paralegal education community. And Kelly and I have had the benefit of having a past conversation with you, and we learned that you're very much a systems thinker like me. And, we were wondering, how is your tech forward mindset help you in this approach for challenges that you're facing in legal education? How is that helping you?
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. You're right. So I teach a variety of courses. I teach traditional semester-long courses, and we've seen tech kind of influence that part of education as well, right? We are remote, we're doing distance education, we're doing asynchronous, we're using these course management systems and all these fancy tech. But also, you mentioned Udemy. We also see these in-between opportunities to train, to upskill, and to keep up with things. And I can tell you the very first time I recorded a Udemy course, I was thinking, how can I compress all of this information into the 1 or 2 hour optimal duration that students are looking for, right? And at first I thought, this can't be teaching people anything, right? There's just so much I want to talk about. But I realized that also challenges you to compress the material to the must knows, right? The big picture things that people go to get an overview, or the upskilling things that they need to focus on at work. So I changed my mindset. I said, well, I need to look at the technology and the way that we're teaching students in a new way, right? I'm not going to dread the 2-hour optimal time slot. I'm not going to dread the learning management system and how to learn to use it. I'm going to say, what can it do for me and my students that I couldn't do with brick and mortar? And I think that reset has really helped me just benefit from the upside of all the technology.
Yeah, so I mean, when we're looking at it from that perspective, and I teach a law office procedures and technology class at the University of Washington, and that asynchronous sort of setting is a new challenge, right, in the education space when it comes to technology and the speed of innovation right now, as far as updating curriculum. And so when we're talking about a tech-enabled paralegal, right, and training a tech-enabled paralegal outside of like the content within a course, what skills and tools do you think of as non-negotiables for that modern workforce that we're looking for?
Great question. Yeah, I think this first one is kind of shocking that I have to mention it, but we were just talking to students in lecture last night, and I told them, if you're in a law office managing deadlines and cases, you have to have some kind of case management system, right? And the lion's share of practices have something like that. A calendar is not going to cut it. It's on its own is not enough. So that's an obvious one. We all need to have that. I think the less obvious ones that are super important are those that involve tech and tools that make us appreciate the value of process, the value of automation, and of course, most recently, generative artificial intelligence. I think those are absolutely non-negotiables.
That's a great outlook and mindset. And I'm glad you're able to teach our future workforce about this. I actually, in my class last night, just talked about case management software and the importance of it. And I referred to it as a one-stop shop, where the entire team can access information so that we're easily on the same page, we're efficient, we're accurate. So I appreciate that you are addressing these things with your learners as well. And I indeed hope that all of our community are also offering the same learning opportunities for their students. In fact, last night we actually dove into and had an in-class assignment in one of the case management platforms, which the students will have access to for a whole year. So I encouraged them. I said, here's the thing. I want you to use this tool for this year that you have it, but don't just, play around with it. I want you to dive in and get your hands on experience and learn what the power of this tool can do for you in terms of your process improvement, in terms of your workflow automation. So that's a really great thing. And you said before that technology combined with curiosity and drive can really level the playing field for both students and professionals. Could you explain that a little further for us?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that paralegals have this unique perspective and view into casework that probably no one else at the firm has, right? They can appreciate and tell you the life cycle of a case. They can see patterns. They can often anticipate what's coming next. And I think that that valuable perspective has to be part of the discussion when teams, legal departments, and offices are talking about in serious ways, how can we use a combination of process, training, and applications to do our work better, right? Often we see sort of top-down approaches, and it's important to have support from leadership, of course. There's resource investments and training investments, but you really also need to include the folks who are in the trenches, right? Paralegals, supervising attorneys, and these are the folks that see the hiccups, the things that work, the things that can work better. And I think that that perspective absolutely has to be part of the conversation.
It's interesting you say that, like that inclusion, of that demographic being part of the conversation. And it's something, a long time being in the litigation space for so long as a paralegal and knowing how important it has been to bring the paralegal on the team on board with the case as early as possible and involve us in those strategy meetings and all of those things, especially when we play that role of that sort of document repository laboratory, or, the gatekeeper of information that comes in and out with data and documentary evidence. So to me, when you're talking about this, you're describing a setting, a setting that is like a modern law firm, right? A modern legal setting. And so if we think of that in the terms of like, how do we, graduate professionals from a curriculum, from a course, to be prepared to work in a workplace such as that. So like, if we could design that modern paralegals course sort of from the ground up, what would that look like? And what sort of topics, themes, or platforms would be like absolutes as components to something along those lines of that program?
Yeah, I have to go for the low-hanging fruit, right? The Gen AI has to be part of that picture. It's everywhere. It's a big part of it. It's popping up in places we didn't imagine. So I think definitely tech in general, but specifically the cutting edge tech is something that we can't wait until it matures and then everyone starts using it. And then we're like, okay, maybe we should use it now too. We have to start thinking ahead and saying, well, how can we utilize it both in teaching, because that's often the first exposure that students have to these tools, but then also in the setting where they're assisting attorneys and they're drafting cases and helping with that work. So I've been lucky because every time I approach a new course that I'm teaching, I basically build it from the ground up, right? And I'm not shy to say, hey, this curriculum's kind of outdated. Like, we have to go back to the drawing board, right? That's hard work. And sometimes educators just want to hit the ground running and focus on the lesson plan. But I've tried to put some of that structural input, and I'm always championing for tech, right? Tech doesn't just have to be one class. It's a module that's ever present in all of the different subjects that we teach. So in that sense, I've been lucky that I can actually do that. I can build courses from the ground up. And I always challenge myself to show them technology, but also Gen AI. Examples of Gen AI tools, particularly with education use cases, include Nectar AI, which is a pretty fun one. But I also incorporate some of the other more general LLMs, just so students have a familiarity and they start having a vocabulary, essentially.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one, Harvey. It's interesting because Kelly and I had the opportunity to kick off our AAfPE Spring Virtual Conference this year, and
Cool.
our presentation, which I think I sent you, just for review and context for today's discussion, was titled "Future-Proofing the Paralegal Profession: Navigating AI, Ethics, and Emerging Workflows." So you're totally vibing with us because Kelly and I are constantly thinking about ways that we can improve our courses, and we very much focus on practical skill acquisition. It is something where we think that is non-negotiable. Another thing that I teach my students, because I have a background in business development in the law firm, is business intelligence. And with the advent and with the speed of the evolution of tools such as generative AI, Gen AI, and Slack and other tools that we may utilize within our legal ecosystems. And this is becoming something more prevalent in even law firms, not just in in-house corporate legal environments. So I'm wondering your thoughts, because you're such an advocate like we are. We're so tech forward. I think that's a common theme with the three of us. And I'm wondering, because of that speed of evolution of these types of assistive tools, particularly Gen AI, how do we teach our students how to learn, with this type of tool? Because one of the comments that Kelly and I got during that spring conference when we presented was some people were kind of on the other end of the spectrum from where we are situated, being tech forward. And they were kind of like, oh my gosh, this is just the end of the world as we know it. And, and we were just like, ooh, scorched earth, what's happening here? But it didn't really upset us. We kind of thought, oh, these are opportunities. There's opportunities not just to educate our community and provide good resources, right? For our paralegal educators, but also our students. How do we teach in this type of environment? Thoughts?
Yeah, that's, I think, an excellent observation. I mean, when we think about so tech is moving fast, right? It moves super fast. And when we think about education, right, the traditional educational setting, we have a very methodical and thorough process as educators where we basically send folks out. They do some stuff, work in industry. Industry gives us direct and indirect feedback, right? They need to do this better. This is a particular skill we should focus on. We go back to the drawing board. We have committee meetings. We look at curricula. We talk to a bunch of other folks. By the time we have a solution, we have like a generation of folks that may have already gone through to the next and the subsequent job. There is value to that consensus building, right? We need to have that ongoing in-depth dialogue with industry. But when it comes to these transformative changes, it's just too slow, honestly. And sometimes by the time we have a solution, it's kind of too late, right? The race has begun. So I think educators have a unique opportunity here. If they kind of reset their thinking with Gen AI and some of these technologies and say, hey, I actually have a unique opportunity to influence what happens before people go out there by focusing on particular themes or instilling some insight and principles. I think that's really empowering, and hopefully students and industry will appreciate that, right? Because then we're taking a leadership position and saying, here's a good way we think we can engage with this technology. And then when you send them out there, they of course will continue building, talking to their teams and coming up with their own innovative approaches. So I think legal educators shouldn't be afraid. We should be okay with rolling up our sleeves, trying it out for ourselves and saying, what can this do for my student today? And what is it going to do for them potentially out in the real world?
Yeah, and I like how you frame that, Harvey, with this out, we can't kidding aside, like RoboCop and all of these things, that is that fear-mongering side of it. Yes, I mean, we don't want robots running down the streets with guns and doing whatever they want and going rogue. But it seems like that's just such a small part of the resistance, I would say. But it's also, it's some of that media side, generative AI, Gen AI is dominating our headlines. I mean, because, but also those tools like ChatGPT and Claude, those open source language models, they are built around our language, right? And so similar to legal professionals, right? We're built around these certain vocabulary and language sets, and understanding that there's opportunity here, right? And that's what I see is it, and that's huge, because this tech expands access to legal services, which enables small firms or solo practitioners to experiment with automation, but it also opens doors for paralegals and other legal professionals to learn and lead. So what sort of opportunities do you see sort of becoming available in front of us because of these innovative tools?
Yeah, I think that can be an incredibly powerful tool for leveling the playing field, both in education, but also when we're talking about professionals, right? Some of the early literature is already telling us when students have access to a well-managed Gen AI tool, they're going from being, the B student to becoming an A student, right? And if we use some of these tools to reach a wider segment of our student population, then as educators, we're not just picking the students who've already learned how to teach themselves and they're already getting the A's. We're taking students that have a significant delta between when they started the course and when they ended it. And I think that's high impact to be able to do that in the education setting. In the field or in industry, it also has powerful impacts, because many of the barriers to entry when it comes to high-tech innovation, whether it's resources or a technical limitation, have been largely reduced by the simplicity and the power of the Gen AI tools. And that's exciting, I think, for medium-sized firms, for boutique firms, and even individual practices to start really experimenting with automation and some of these things that would have been technically not feasible in the past.
And I really picked up on what you said earlier, Harvey, with respect to if we as educators could reframe our mindset from that traditional or status quo mindset in the way that we structure our coursework or think about it, and how we're accustomed to teaching. So I think this is a really great opportunity for us as paralegal educators as well. And, not just learning how to use tech, because we need to know how to use it so we know how to teach it as well, right? We have to think innovatively. We have to think about training and education and curiosity and the intersection of those things, right? And for the folks who don't know, Harvey and I actually know of each other because we both teach through a program here in San Diego, Miramar College paralegal program. And in past conversations with Harvey, I learned about this opportunity that he had to participate in paralegal education. Well, actually, it's just educator training where we have these professional development courses with the integration of AI and GenAI, right? And this particular platform was Nectar, Nectir, right, Harvey?
Nectar AI, yep.
Yes, and you were part of this beta group, right? As part of Miramar College. And I wanted you to share a little bit with our paralegal educators who've not heard of this platform or are familiar with it. What was that experience like? What worked and what would you want to see more of from your beta experience?
Yeah, definitely. I should give some the backstory before that opportunity. I became super excited when I started to see the college, but also the state and state educators really talking about AI in a serious way. And so I would jump on webinars and discussions and groups. I'm like, I just want to absorb everything, right? And I came to a point where I was playing with the commercial tools personally for my own purposes, and I was like, well, as an educator, how do I use this in the learning environment, right? How do we, there's considerations about student privacy and commercial aspects of the tools that are out there. Is there something for me? Will there be something for me? And so that was in the back of my mind. And then again, opportunity sometimes just comes up right unexpectedly. And I heard about Nectar AI, and that's exactly what it was. It's a Gen AI tool that's built essentially on top of those powerful LLMs. So it has access to Claude and has access to ChatGPT, but it's sandboxed and it's designed for education. And it's not searching the web. It's not, as far as I understand, training the outside models. And probably most importantly, it's putting you as the instructor in the driver's seat. It's saying you get to build your own course assistant, kind of like a TA or a tutor. You can set the parameters. You can play with the controls. You can even build a knowledge library where you will provide readings or whatever material that you want it to know about, your syllabus, for example. And then it becomes like, your number two, right? It helps with routine questions, but surprisingly, even substantive questions. And that's incredibly useful for students because it's pretty much always available. And it's useful for educators because you have sort of a number two that can be there when you might not be in the Zoom session or right by your LMS system. And it can help students also navigate syllabi and get ready for class. So it's been really fun playing with that tool, learning about how it works and how we can tinker with it. It keeps improving, as all Gen AI does. So I don't know, the next time I look at it, probably will have more features than the first time I looked at it.
Well, I'm really excited to look at it and see, especially with a new quarter for me starting next week. So I'm really excited. Also, I have to do a shout out to Miramar. I'm a Miramar alumni from their paralegal program. So I'm honored to be speaking with two different professors from the program. So anyways, back to our discussion. So with Nectar, do you think platforms and tools similar to that can really help build? I feel in the asynchronous legal space or educational space, it's even more challenging to really demonstrate what real-time collaboration does look like on a regular basis with a legal team. Christine and I have this saying from another colleague of ours that was, he said, the practice of law is a team sport. And so, trying to get the future legal workforce to understand real-time collaboration is absolutely necessary in this space. Do you think that platforms such as Nectar can help us to mirror those types of collaboratory spaces in the legal workspace now in the education space?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a lot of overlap when it comes to whether it's distance education or remote workers. There's some similarity between the pros and cons, right? The challenges and the benefits in that type of learning environment. Asynchronous teaching, asynchronous training, asynchronous meetings are useful because they connect people from different parts of the country and different time zones, and they let us connect in many ways. But they have to be sort of recorded and they have to be sent out. I think that tools like Nectar AI, but more generally GenAI, that uses knowledge bases, right? That accesses a playbook, a training manual, or maybe Harvey's cases. How does he like to do his cases? If you train tools like that, then Harvey's in a meeting, but the paralegal can ask a question, right? What would Harvey do, right? And I can imagine tools like that in the firm setting that students are already familiar with because they've used it in the education setting. That teams who do knowledge management, and I think there will be bigger teams doing that, can then link that up with the AI and curate it so that it becomes like a go-to and basically fills in those gaps that you're talking about, right? Where you might feel disconnected, you don't have to be, right? There's an in-between. And of course, folks meet face-to-face and they can always sync up. But in that in-between period, you can continue to collaborate with that type of technology.
Harvey, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry,
Did you have a question?
Christine. Yeah, I wanted to pop in there real quick on something. So, I think it's interesting how you just talked about that embedding that legal knowledge right within the team to sort of maximize innovation. And you almost provided a creative way to do it in the educational space because you're embedding the knowledge that you're looking for, right? That as the instructor, let's say, or the professor leading this group of individuals, of learners, and they want to please you, right? So it's similar too. And I name ChatGPT Chatty is my nickname for it because we have this personal relationship, right? And I'm asking it to do certain things for me in my style, in my tone, and how I want things done. And so how can we sort of translate that into our students to understand that you are embedding your personal knowledge and growing the diversity, your ability to synthesize this knowledge by utilizing these tools? How can we embed that with our students?
I think there's no way around having to look under the hood a little bit, right? I mean, the tools are incredibly intuitive, right? OpenAI and LLMs have been around for quite a while. And what's really made it exciting and easy for everyone to use it is that interface that we understand, right? But the LLM is the engine behind it. And I think appreciating how it works, right? How the probabilistic nature of how it works, what does the base LLM have? How does memory work? What are context windows? And those are little bits and pieces, but they're important because it makes you appreciate kind of from a technical perspective what the tool can do that humans can't, right? And what humans can do that the tool can't. And then probably more importantly, what the two can do together, I think. So I think that's the conversation we need to have is, letting students understand some of the technical parameters, but also I remember someone said in a webinar I attended that using the different LLMs, it's like coworkers with different personalities, right? It's doing the same thing, but you can feel it's different. And I think that's really important, telling students to kind of go out there and experiment. And yes, ChatGPT is super popular, but there's Claude, there's Gemini, there are open other LLMs. Just continue to immerse yourself and appreciate what it can do and how you can tinker with it.
I really like that analogy, Harvey, how you said, yes, it's kind of like your different coworkers and personalities. I like that. And, I think back because all of us are very tech forward in our style of practice and teaching and thinking, obviously. But I'm wondering about folks who may not be. You remember I brought up that discussion or comment that we had in our presentation. And we did an informal poll and we said, okay, in terms of how comfortable are you with GenAI? Right. And this was back in March. We said scale of 1 to 10, 1 being running for the hills. What is this? I don't like this. I don't know what it is. How am I going to even teach this? I don't know what it is. To 10, where we're like, yes, we love this. I use it on the daily. This is amazing. I can't wait to see what this does. Right. That's our scale. And you can imagine it just ran the gamut. Right. But there was a lot of maybe 1s, 2s, and 3s in that poll. And I wonder because, for people who are not tenured faculty, like Kelly and I are adjunct faculty, right, with our programs. And I think to myself, for those of us who are maybe overwhelmed and don't understand what this tool is and not maybe are very time limited in terms of having that kind of immersion, where we want to learn about it, or perhaps even folks who are just a little bit under resourced, right? What advice do you have for those folks who may want to bring more tech into their programs, but may have that overwhelm or maybe be a little under-resourced?
Yeah, I have actually. I'm getting my soapbox ready for this answer. I think it's a two-part. I have a two-part answer. So I have a practical answer, which I think is super important for, what do I do tomorrow? What do I do next week? And then I have a bigger sort of philosophical answer, and I have to borrow some thinking from one of my favorite authors and experts in this space, Richard Susskind. He also actually introduced the concept of embedding legal knowledge. So when you think about technology, just even outside of the legal space, in the last few decades, it's really disrupted and rebuilt so many aspects of our daily, weekly life, right? And whether it's food delivery or travel or shopping, logistics, we've had those things that we were used to get reimagined by creative engineers and get rebuilt, and they've introduced lots of efficiencies, right? But at the same time, we've seen hiccups. We've seen things that we didn't anticipate. And we said, oh gosh, now, we're just realizing this now. How do we mitigate? How do we deal with it? I think with legal tech, we are at a unique sort of point where we can look back and say, okay, this is happening now to this industry. And what do we do about it? And again, I'm going to borrow an idea from Richard Susskind. Soon after, I think ChatGPT was released, he had a conversation with the International, I think, Trademark Association. And he said something like, toward the end, hey, the AI is here. And like Kelly was saying, because its domain is language, like lawyers, it's going to make a huge impact, right? And we have kind of a choice. We can resist it and say, no, the way I do things is the way it should be done forever. And then let other people who have a different opinion rebuild the world around us. Or we can say, all right, let me be part of this. Let me understand what it is. Let me be part of the building that. And so what I encourage educators to do is to take the second choice, obviously, right? Roll up your sleeves and then think back to this unique opportunity you have to influence the future, and then say, well, how can I affect how the tool, rebuilds my experience and other people's experience in beneficial ways. So that's my philosophical answer. The shorter answer with respect to, okay, how do I do all of that, right? So educators, folks who are dedicated their time to education, we have the luxury that practitioners or dual practitioners and educators don't have, is we have this space to play, right? Labs, R&D, they exist in companies, but they're not really a thing in legal, right? We're too busy with casework, and that's real. People are busy with casework to tinker. So the folks who are dedicated to education, I think they should embrace the fact that they have room to play and take advantage of it. The folks that are kind of in the middle, look for, again, innovation and technology to help you get up to speed fast, right? You don't need necessarily the semester-long course or another degree to understand how this stuff works. You already have your expertise. But look for those upskilling courses, look for those boot camps, talk to people who are, thinking the same way, find those mentors. You can learn stuff pretty quickly because no one's really an expert on this stuff yet.
Right. I mean, and so it's sort of opportunities right in front of us to, really expand our, list of skills and masteries, right? So we were talking from the educational perspective or educator's perspective. If we look at it from the student perspective, the learner perspective, especially new paralegals coming into and breaking into the industry, and if they're looking to break into that legal tech or innovative roles that are sort of being exposed now with these tools that are coming out, but don't know where to start, how do we guide them? How do we push them along? How do we encourage them to go after that when it's so scary and the gray zone right now for us?
I think it has to be, again, emphasizing that opportunity and the sort of new roles that can come up, right? When a student goes into a paralegal program, they may have some notion of what the work is going to be like. And now that they might find themselves in an ops department, or they might be in a software company. They can be a legal project manager. They can be a solutions developer, an interface developer. These are things that were not available before. So I think part of it is to get some excitement, right? And tell them that this investment you're making to learn the tool, the technology, is because it opens up opportunities that may not have existed before. If they're focusing on Gen AI in particular, they have to know the fundamentals. There's no way around it. But just like with educators, I think, again, taking advantage rather of new ways to upskill, whether it's, and we have that now, right? We have a lot of distance education and asynchronous education and fully employed programs and everything in between. Explore that, right? It's not just the brick and mortar. You don't have to cut yourself off from the world. You can have continuous learning, and there's ways to do that. I think those are the two things I would encourage paralegals to do.
Man, you've got the wheels turning, Harvey, in my brain. I feel like I could talk to you for another 2 to 3 hours on some of these topics, because I love the intersection of business and law and technology. I really appreciate your thoughts and insights that you're sharing with us in our community today. But, I wanted to, as we wind down our conversation today, I kind of wanted to end with a fun lightning round and kind of get your quick thoughts on these big ideas for your consideration. And so the first one is one tool every paralegal should learn this year.
I wish I could say something creative, but it has to be Gen AI. But not just ChatGPT. Go learn Claude. Go try Gemini. Keep learning.
Being adaptable, number one. I love that. What about the future of legal education in one word?
Exciting.
Very true. And the biggest barrier to innovation in the legal field?
I think it's our own mindset, our own thinking, right? If we have an approach that says this isn't going to work, we're not going to try. It's our own thinking.
Yeah, we are the ones who get in our own way sometimes. Very cool. Your go-to resource for staying current on legal tech?
It has to be Richard Susskind. His thinking, his books. He's been talking about these things before legal tech was a thing. And he's almost always right. So, yeah, he has some really good material out there.
Yeah, definitely. Kelly and I actually used his latest book, How to Think About AI for the Perplexed, right? So we included that in our resource list. And my last question is, what gives you hope about the next generation of legal professionals?
Yeah, so I think this generation of folks are tech natives, right? They've grown up in an environment where they already have smartphones. They may not have ever seen dial-up, and they're learning fast and they're developing as people alongside technology. So that's super exciting to me, because it means that they're ready to hit the ground running, they're ready to learn new things, and they're ready to carry the torch forward.
I love that. Carrying the torch forward, paying it forward. Well, that was an awesome lightning round. That was our first time doing this on the podcast. And I really like that, because it just like shows how witty and on how you can respond on your feet, Harvey. So thank you for that. We really appreciated that. And this is also, yeah, it was fun. This has been a really inspiring and insightful conversation. So thank you for helping us reimagine what's possible for paralegals and legal education. We will be continuing this conversation in our classrooms, our curriculum committees, and definitely on this podcast. For our listeners, if you're looking for ways to future-proof your programs, let Harvey's Insights be an invitation to take that next step. Thank you for joining us on this episode of AAfPE's Legal Luminaries. We hope today's conversation sparked your curiosity and offered new perspectives on what's possible at the intersection of legal education and technology. You'll find all the links to the resources that we discussed today in the show notes below, and a big thank you to Doug Lusk and the National Society for Legal Technology for their continued support in bringing this podcast to life. We'll leave you with this question to ponder. If you had 20 minutes to interview anyone in the legal world, who would it be and why? Please send us your thoughts and suggestions. And until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and please stay curious.